deciding on who's going to be able to take control to be able to set it up for the sprint. Now, we know Colavita has some pretty good sprinters. We know Wolfpack has some pretty good sprinters. As we see a replay right now, looking back towards the middle. Still going, and they're just a touch of the handlebars, and a rider in the light blue jersey going down right in the middle of the group. And it might have been Shift Racing.
All it took was just a few seconds. My race was over. My season was over. Everything I had worked for leading up to that crash was over. A few seconds, and the words that I had written on my hand that morning, the words that were supposed to be my mantra for the entire 2019 cycling season, the words that, at least in my mind, were going to help me achieve my lifelong dream of professional sport, those words became tangible. I broke my collarbone in half on impact. The next 19 months would be defined by those 5 little yet oh so big words: potential is greater than pain. Now, the doctor said, though in half, it was still placed in such a way that it should heal on its own. So after 4 months of moving as little as possible in a sling, I wasn't so lucky. Booked for surgery. Potential is greater than pain. A plate and 6 screws, a 4-inch scar, bionic bee, more time in a sling, and months of physical therapy. It is still not moving right. I can't lift my arm past 90 degrees. What is wrong? MRI shows I have a torn bicep tendon. Would have happened the same day as the crash. We had no idea. Oh, and on top of that, I also now have an inflammatory condition usually reserved for 80-year-old women called frozen shoulder. That's simply from spending 22 weeks in a sling. Surgery number 2, here we go. Potential is greater than pain. 3 more scars, more physical therapy, finally some strength in an arm that's been atrophied for almost a year now. Things are looking up, literally up, as I reach for the pull-up bar and dislocated. Setback number, I don't know, I've lost count at this point. Potential is greater than pain. It has to be. If I think of every awful, unfortunate, or frustrating thing that's happened in my life, these words hold true. Potential is greater than pain. So what about you? Think of all it's taken for you to be here today, all of those storms you've weathered. Were they worth it? Was the reward equal to, if not bigger, than the discomfort? Are you where you are now because of those tornadoes and firestorms and hurricanes and deep aching pain? Or are you in the middle of a storm right now? Are you hanging on by a thread right here, right now? Because some days I still am. And I ask you, as I ask myself, to remember our potential. Regardless of any outside circumstance, our potential sits, waiting to be unleashed, waiting for the storm to pass. It's not going anywhere, I promise you. We can and we will achieve incredible things because potential is simply greater than pain. But is it? You see, words only have weight if you believe them. Much like Santa is real, it kind of loses its umph when you stop believing, doesn't it? I have my doubts some days, to be sure. I've had my pity parties, my crying in the shower moments. I've flirted with, it can always be worse, and then magically, somehow, it actually is. I've had my I deserve this cookie days. Things have been tough. You know what? I deserve the whole box. Screw it. But then I remember the words I wrote on my hand, and they carry me back to belief. Potential is greater, I know you know it by now, than pain. So do you believe it? Do you believe that the potential inside of you, the things you can accomplish in your life, the millions of doors of opportunity in front of you are greater than any pain that may come your way? Be it emotional, physical, mental. No pain stands a chance to your infinite human potential. You were born with it. It is in you. Your circumstance will change. Your potential will not. Your environment will change. Your potential will not. Your age will change. Your potential will not. Your goals, your relationships, your outlook, you will change, but your potential will not. And even if you never reach the pinnacle of that potential, the point is and always will be that you reached at all. And so I reach every day, hand outstretched, the words permanently etched into my soul. And now to my flesh, potential is greater than pain. And this would be a moment in a normal Toastmasters meeting where we would do the hands and everything, but I can't see any of your faces. So we're going to just move right into slides. Thank you so much for listening. And oh, look at that. We've got some little thumbs up. Appreciate it. It's nice to see a little bit of interaction in a very strange digital world that we are living in these days. I will go ahead and pull up my slides and we will get right into the nitty gritty. Can I get a little thumbs if you can see my slides? Perfect. Okay, beautiful. So this is obviously an image of the day that I crashed. I wrote those words on my hand, like I said, and you can see I have the sling as well. I thought this was a nice image to start us off with because I will talk a lot about authenticity today and how I feel like the things that you speak about when you are trying to motivationally speak need to be really true and authentic to you. And so this actually happened. I do now have those words tattooed on my hand as well, and they mean a lot to me. So as you probably read in the description of the session today, I'm going to be using a bit of a cake analogy. So it's okay if you've never baked before. I think we're going to keep it very simple. And the idea is that no matter if you've baked or not, or cooking or baking is your thing, we're still going to all follow the same recipe together. And I'm going to hopefully break things down in a manageable, digestible way for everyone. Our recipe today, we're going to start with the message or idea. That's really the flavor of your cake, okay? The main thing with motivational speech from my perspective is you need to start with your message. It's really, really important to have that dialed, have that be the one thing that you are not really playing with as you go. You know, this is my message, this is what we're going for, and everything else will fall in line after that. For me, I think all of you know, it was potential is greater than pain. That was the message. And hopefully from start to finish, that's what you got. And that's what you're leaving with here today as well. The second is our story. So this is the type of cake that you're going to be baking, right? There's a million different cakes. There's bundt cakes and angel food cakes and cupcakes and all kinds of cakes. Everyone has different stories. And what you're going to be baking today is completely up to you. And it's obviously not going to be a story that I have the same one in my life. It's unique to each and every one of you. And that's the beautiful thing about stories. They are yours and yours alone. And we'll dive into a couple of different types of stories and what I feel works the best with motivational speaking in particular. Next, we have our structure of the speech, our ingredients, how we're going to mix things all together. I'm going to go through 3 different ways that I think are effective to work through motivational speech when you're working on it for your Toastmasters. It's not the only 3, right? There's a million different ways to do it. And I'll open up the floor at that point to maybe see if anyone has any other ideas of what might work for them. And the last one is delivery. Now, flavor is different than taste. And I make that distinction very clear because your message and your flavor is what you intended in the beginning. That's what you are hoping somebody leaves with. But you might have intended to make a lemon cake and then they're leaving with notes of orange somehow. So the idea with your flavor and your taste is that through and through, the message that you started with is also the taste that they leave with in their mouth at the end of your speech. I'm a big quotes person, so we've got a couple of quotes throughout here. The first is, "You can speak well if your tongue can deliver the message of your heart." This was by a man named John Ford. And we're starting with message. And it's so true that no matter what, no matter if you stumble, no matter if you forget your words here and there, no matter if, a plane comes crashing through your building while you're giving your speech, if you are delivering a message from your heart, you're going to speak well and it's going to come out properly. So flavor, AKA message, is everything. Even if it isn't pretty, does it taste good, right? Like I just said, if you stumble, if you forget some words, is it still the message that you wanted somebody to leave with? Are they still getting the bulk, the beef of everything? So I put this little lovely photo in here. If you Google nailed it, it will just make your day, because there are a lot of examples like this where you have this beautiful cake that somebody wanted to make and then what actually happened. That being said, as long as that cake tastes good, the one on the bottom, it's okay. That's what you wanted at the end of the day. It might not look pretty, it might not be perfect, but does it taste good? Is your message coming across in your speech? That's all I want you to focus on, at least to start. So first of all, keep it simple. Keep your message simple. I wrote, think bumper sticker worthy. Okay, so it should be a short phrase, maybe one sentence, digestible. That's your message. Again, for me, it was those 5 words: potential is greater than pain. Could be a full sentence, could be, just a couple of words, but no matter what, keep it really simple, because it's something that you're potentially going to say a few different times, and it shouldn't be like a paragraph that you're repeating to people so that they get your message. Second thing, as I've mentioned, keep it authentic. You have to be about it. People can smell inauthenticity from a mile away. Okay, so if you're telling somebody else's story, if you're saying words that you don't really believe yourself, you're not going to make that connection. And a really good speech is all about connection. Even if you haven't crashed on your bike, you can still relate to the phrase potential is greater than pain. And that was very true to me. And I'm sure that you have an example where potential is greater than pain is true for you. And that leads right into keep it relatable. This isn't rocket science, right? Motivational speeches are not talking about quantum physics, unless you have a quantum physics related story that you can then tie back to your message, okay? So the main thing there is simple, authentic, relatable. If you follow those 3 things when you're coming up with your messaging, you can't really go wrong. Next of our several quotes we have, public speaking is the art of diluting a 2-minute idea with 2-hour vocabulary, Mr. John F. Kennedy. So you have a message and it's short and it's sweet and it's simple and it's authentic and it's relatable. And now you have to create a 5 to 7 minute speech about your message. How do you do that? You do that through story. You're not just going to say your message and then your speech is over. You're telling a story that relates to your message, and we're going to work through what that looks like. So what story are we baking? Lots of different types of cake, okay? And it doesn't matter what the story is. It's your story. Do you? The audience really doesn't care as long as it relates back to your message. It can be fair game. Could be you at the grocery store and you learn something about yourself. I don't know. I'm not you. I wasn't there, but tell me about it. It's very, very important that you don't get hung up on the 3 Ds. And I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about this, because when I first joined Toastmasters and I told some of the people at Wallmasters that I was interested in motivational speaking, that I was thinking about potentially signing up for the international speech contest, this whole concept of the 3 Ds came up. And they were like, everybody talks about the 3 Ds, death, divorce, and disease, death, divorce, and disease. And it got a little like heavy. And some of the greatest speeches that I have seen, they are about these things, death, divorce, and disease. And I think you could also argue that the speech I gave today is kind of in the same realm, because it wasn't necessarily happy subject matter, right? It's difficult, painful things that I'm going through. That being said, it's not the only way. And I don't want you to think that you have to speak about these 3 things in order to give an incredible motivational speech. I really thought in the beginning of all of this that people wouldn't listen unless I had something horrible happen to me. And I think a lot of you can probably relate to that, where you think to yourself, well, I wasn't homeless as a child, or I didn't overcome cancer, or my mom didn't die when I was 7, and those are the things that a lot of times you see motivational speakers talking about, but they're not the only thing. And sometimes the greatest lessons in life come through moments of joy. And so I challenge you, when you're going to write a motivational speech, sure, come up with some of these 3 Ds. I would say depressing is probably a 4th D there, just depressing in general, that you can have those life lessons. But at the same time, there are so many moments of joy and happiness and elation. Okay, so moving back into another quote, because we all know at this point, I love my quotes. So speakers who talk, speakers who talk about what life has taught them never fail to keep the attention of their listeners. This could not be more true. If you are talking about a life lesson, something that life has taught you, just like the beginning quote, you're going to keep people's attention because it's real to you. It's authentic to you. It's something that mattered to you. And there aren't really many life lessons that are small, right? Life lessons are huge, and they're things that you carry with you forever. And people want to hear about them because they want to learn from your lessons as well. So never think that any message is too small. Never think that a lesson that you've learned in your life isn't going to relate. Maybe it doesn't relate to absolutely every single person, but if you've connected with one person in your speech, to me, you've won. So let's talk about the different ways to structure a speech. We can mix it up. Remember, there are 1,000 ways to bake a cake. So I'm going to go through 3, and then I'm going to open the floor a little bit and see if anyone else has any other ideas about ways that we can put things together. The 3 that I have are very basic and a really great rubric for you to start with a motivational speech. The first is story to message. And with our baking analogy, this is kind of like baking a surprise. So you're really going along that journey with the audience. It's a lead up to a big finish. And this type of structure, I think, is very common with Toastmasters in general. We have our story up front in the beginning. This is all the things that happened, and the audience is playing along with you, kind of trying to figure out where they're going, what's going to happen. And then all of a sudden the surprise, aka the message, is revealed at the end. It's tried, it's true, it works, and you should never feel like it's too boring, because as long as you're engaging when you're speaking, people will follow you. The second is message, story, message. So this is a little bit more of a spell it out kind of approach. So the example that I have here with baking, obviously very, very basic, but it's like, hey, we're going to bake a lemon cake today. And then now together we're baking that cake. Here we go. And then here is your lemon cake. So you tell them what you're going to tell them with the message. You go with your story in the middle, and then you wrap it up full circle again with the message on the back half. This, again, I think is a pretty tried and true concept with Toastmasters, and I've seen a lot of motivational speakers out in the world do it as well, and it works. And I think that both of these are really great options. The third is a little bit more in your face, and this is message, message, message. This to me is the taste test method with baking a cake. So the message is kind of sprinkled multiple times throughout the speech. You are consistently reminding the audience of the message. And we don't have screens on. My plan was to say, hey, what do you guys think I used today? I'm just going to go ahead and tell you that was really the one that I used. Number 3, I said the words potential is greater than pain 7 times in a 6-minute speech. And I don't think there's a single one of you who are going to leave today not knowing that that's what the speech was about. It was hammered, it was drilled, and you got it punched in your face multiple times. So with relating this to my speech today, if I had gone the story to message route, it would have looked a little bit different, right? So it would have been more so me explaining a bit more in detail everything that had happened with the crash and the surgeries. And I would have gone into much more depth on those things and really kind of build you up to that. And then potentially at the end, every time I say the word potential now, I think potential is greater than pain. Potentially at the end, then just throw in that message. And I think when you look at about a 7-minute speech, to me, when you're doing the story to message, you're about 2/3 story to 1/3 message. That's kind of your formula there, because the story is really a big part of the message, right? And the story is leading into the message. So in so many ways, you need the story to be very captivating and have a lot of meat to it and be building to what is inevitably going to be the message. So you don't need as much time at the end for your message because you've built them into it along the way, if that makes sense. Message, story, message. Today was maybe a little bit of a mix of 2 and 3 because I did say the words potential is greater than pain early on, right? We watched the video, then I probably had a couple of sentences before I said, those words became tangible, potential is greater than pain. That being said, the difference was I would have had a large chunk of story in the middle. So if I had done really tried and true message, story, message, I would have potentially started with the words potential is greater than pain. Just come out the gate. Potential is greater than pain, and here's why. And then I would have given you this long story of all of the things that had happened to me, and then circled back, potential is greater than pain again. And obviously the story is an example of why potential is greater than pain. This message situation is my personal favorite because I lean a lot on repetition when I speak. To me, I've done a lot of coaching in my life with high school kids and middle school kids. And unless you tell them things 7,000 times, they don't remember them. And even though most of us in Toastmasters are adults, I really think that repetition is the best way to get somebody to remember something after your speech is done. So obviously, like I said potential is greater than pain 7 times in a 6-minute speech, and you're going to remember it. So it really kind of depends, right? If your message is a bit longer, maybe it's a sentence or two, message, saying it a bunch of times isn't really going to work because it's just too long. It's not going to land properly. So then I would play more with the story to message or message, story, message. So I'd love to open up the floor if anyone wants to. Not sure how we could unmute ourselves in a nice little fashion, but does anyone have any other ideas of ways to organize a speech when you've got this message and you've got this story, and kind of how we could intertwine them?
Bianca, they can raise their hands and then you can call on them individually and they can be asked the question that you have for them.
Okay, perfect. I have Joan. Joan, would you like to unmute and uncamera yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Bianca. And by the way, it's fabulous. Your story's fabulous. Your attitude's fabulous. You're just off the charts. I'm wondering, have you ever opened up your speaking to the audience and have them ask you questions so it becomes interactive?
That's actually a very interesting thought. And I do have some points about that a little bit later in terms of delivery. I think the only tricky part there would be if somebody kind of asked you like a left field question and it doesn't really, like, I think if you're going to ask the audience to kind of bring you in, you're going to want to almost lead them into the question you want them to ask you, if that makes sense. Because if somebody asks you something kind of, like I said, out in left field, you're maybe going to have a hard time navigating that and pulling it back full circle. But I do really like that idea. And like I said, I'll come back to that when we go to the next slide about delivery. There's a couple of things with interacting and engaging with the audience that I do think are really effective with motivational speaking.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Absolutely. Anyone else? We could do 1 or 2 more.
I had a question. My question is, how do you engage an audience if the audience does not have the background? For example, how do you engage the audience with technical details?
So as I mentioned earlier,
thank you.
Motivational speaking, absolutely. Motivational speaking is not rocket science, but you could use a quantum physics story to come back to your message. I think as long as your message follows those 3 things, it is relatable, it is simple, and it is authentic, and it's short and concise. I do think that you can bring the audience along in a more detailed technical type of story. Again, as long as you're going to circle back to that simple, authentic, and relatable message. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, let's bring it on back. My screen is still being shared, correct or no? I think I need to reshare again. Let's reshare. Okay, so moving on to our next quote, because we know I just can't help myself. It usually takes me more than 3 weeks to prepare a good impromptu speech. Mark Twain. This one just, I thought, was perfect for Toastmasters with relation to table topics and how difficult that can all be for all of us. But I think it also leads itself into where we're going to talk about delivery, which is next. So how does it taste? I want your audience to finish with no doubts as to what kind of cake you baked. As I talked about in the beginning, maybe you wanted to bake a lemon cake, but did they leave tasting lemon? The hope is yes. And in my opinion, the way that you do that in a lot of ways is through delivery. So to start out, as I mentioned before, repetition. I said potential is greater than pain 7 times. How many times have I said it in this speech? You're never going to forget those words. Potential is greater than pain. It's all seared into your brains because I've said it so many times. It can be redundant, and I think that's the point in some ways, where you don't want to, like, you know, hammer it into the wall so everyone's like, okay, please never say that phrase ever again. That being said, find ways to say things more than once or in different ways. How can you say potential is greater than pain in another way? And there were a couple points where I'm basically saying the same thing, but just kind of phrasing it slightly different. And that way too, if potentially your message isn't landing with everyone, well, you still have other ways of making that connection because you phrased it in a couple of different ways. Pausing. Pausing is something that I think is very hard for people in Toastmasters to do because we're nervous and we feel like we need to fill space. And what are they going to think? It's hard. It's very hard to slow ourselves down, and you have your speech written and you have your notes and all of these things, and we start talking really, really, really fast. But when you pause, people lean in a little bit. They want to know what's coming next. They're hanging on your words. It's an intentional pause. I'm pausing because I want you to pay back attention to me. In a 7-minute speech, I would say probably around minute 3 is when you start to lose people. Not because you're not engaging, but because people's attention spans are small, and 3 minutes is about as long as anybody can do before we're kind of like, all right, I'm thinking about what I'm gonna have for dinner tonight, and what if somebody texts me on my phone? So at that point is when I think pausing becomes really, really effective. Because again, the second you pause, you want to know what I'm going to say next, right? Like, what is she going to say? So pausing cannot be overstated enough. I think it is such an effective way of re-engaging the audience at different points in your speech, where again, Roy Deep, I think when you mentioned technical, that would be a great point to pause after you've done like kind of a big technical moment with people of whatever it is that you're talking about. Pause, let them digest it, then move on. The next one is engaging in interaction. And the first woman who spoke, Joan, I think maybe something with a J, Jill, Joan, there was a J in there. This is an interesting way that you can play with the audience. So I had maybe 2 or 3 questions that I actually asked during the speech, not necessarily that I meant for you to truly answer back, but for you to be thinking about as I continue to talk. So I said, potential is greater than pain at the end of a sentence. And then I said, but is it? And then I paused. Do you actually think potential is greater than pain? I said, do you believe it? Do you believe da 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 da? And so you're asking without necessarily expecting a response from people, but you're getting them to think about what you want them to think about. You're sort of leading their thought process at that point. And then also, it doesn't really work in a Zoom setting. And I played around with the way that I phrased this, but I said, at one point I said, you know it by now, potential is greater than, and in a in-person setting, I would have expected everyone in tandem to say then pain, because I had said it like 5 times by that point. So that's an interesting way as well. If you're potentially using that repetition, you could have them say the second half of whatever it is, or the whole phrase. And I've seen a couple people do really well in the speech contest by having sort of callbacks with the audience where they're actually interacting as well. Gesturing. This is one that I am constantly working on in a Zoom setting because I move quickly and I like to use my hands and they're all over the place. And I get consistent feedback at my Wall Masters meetings that my hands are moving too fast and it's way too blurry and there's just a lot going on. So it's one of those things where gestures, because we're in this digital space right now, you don't have your whole body as present with everybody in a room. They can't feel your energy. So I do think that getting your hands in the frame, so we're not just talking head and shoulders, is important. Not necessarily the entire time. You can bring them down. You can just talk. You can bring one up. You can get a little closer to the camera. You can lean back. But that's a way to, again, can keep that engagement where if I'm just sitting here the whole time and I said the exact same story, potential is greater than pain, and is it, and da-da-da-da-da, it would have been interesting and I can play with my voice, but when I'm here and I'm here and I'm here and I'm here, you're watching. You really want to, again, very similar to pausing, you want to see what's going to happen next. So they're not meant to be distracting. And again, that's something that I'm personally working on because I can move too fast and then everything's blurry. But I do think there's a time and a place and it should be intentional and it can be really effective at keeping your audience engaged. Creating visuals. So these can be literal or figurative. So an obvious example of a literal cue creating a visual would be the video that I showed you. I could have told you how the crash went, but I showed you how it went. If you're using a PowerPoint, again, great way to have a visual. Roy Deep, potentially great way to put your technical stuff. I think technical stuff is often much better put in a visual format because people are visual learners versus let me explain quantum physics to you in a paragraph versus let me put this diagram on a screen and maybe you're still not going to get it, but you're probably going to get closer than if I just talked you through it. So it can either be those literal ones. Figurative is obviously just making a visual with your words and your descriptions. And sometimes I find that visuals can be a little bit distracting. Like I could have had the race keep going and you could have watched some more, but we watched maybe 15 seconds of it, gives you a little nugget, and then boom, you're back on the speaker. And these things, when you are creating these visuals, they have to add value to your message. They shouldn't just be, hey, I wanted to do a PowerPoint, so I'm going to put this PowerPoint on here, but is it really adding to what I'm saying? Obviously, this is a true presentation style, but with motivational speaking, if you have your quantum physics PowerPoint up and then you're trying to motivate people, is that landing? So maybe during that technical piece, you're going to put up a little visual. It's going to help people understand and then take it back down and it's just you. I think that's really effective. The last one is vocal variety. And most of these are very just speaking in general, right? These aren't necessarily motivational speaking things. These are across the board. They're going to help you deliver a more effective speech. When you think about vocal variety, if 10 is you yelling and 1 is you whispering, I would like you to try and use all 10 numbers in a speech, if possible. I don't want you to stay at 10. I don't want you to stay at 1. But at one point I leaned in and I said, what is wrong? That's my 10. And then I leaned in and I said, but is it? Are you hanging on by a thread right now? When you have that vocal variety, again, it's another way to get people to lean in, to engage a little bit. If yelling and whispering just aren't going to fit with what you're doing, and that's fine because that can be a lot, I would still try and say somewhere between 3 and 8, you got to play with all of those because nobody wants to listen to a monotonous speaker. They just don't, right? If I had the exact same words of my speech, but I spoke the entire thing like this and I didn't move my hands at all and potential is greater than pain, and do you believe it? Ooh, you just wouldn't. Okay, so here's some lovely photos that I found of me as a child. One not enjoying my cake and one very much enjoying my cake. I thought these would be just a nice little giggle. Wish I could see everybody. I'm assuming you're all laughing. It's hilarious. So in sum, we've got simple, authentic, and relatable for the message. Follow those 3 things, you really can't go wrong. All stories are fair game. The 3Ds are not the only way. And I really do truly challenge you to find a happy story that you can get a lesson out of and that you can turn into a motivational speech. There's a ton of them. The 3 ones that I went through with you: story to message, message, story, message, and message, message, message. Say that 5 times fast. Those are really great ways to, or great places to start. They're not the only way, but if you're new to this and maybe you're going through the motivational strategies pathway, I think they're a great place for you to start. And delivery is key. Make sure the flavor you started with is the taste that they get and leave with at the end of the day. So important. And that is all of those delivery tools that we went through. Well, that being said, who is ready to dig in? I thought this would be fun. Maybe. We'll see. I know everyone hates table topics, and we talked about it earlier, but I thought what we could do is I could call on a couple of different people. I've got 3 to 4 prompts. I have a message, a predetermined message. It's basically like a little quote, probably something that you've heard before. And then I'm going to give you a format: story to message, message, story, message, or message, message, message. And you're going to have 2 minutes, very similar to table topics, to deliver and see what happens. No one's expecting perfection. I really just want to see if we can get the format and the structure going from that story to message, message, story, message, and message, 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 so we can really differentiate those. So I'll throw the first one up here so that you have an idea of what's going on. So the first one's going to be story to message, and the quote / message itself is, if it doesn't challenge you, it doesn't change you. Is anyone interested? Story to message. So you'd be telling your story, following in to the message. Anyone? Any takers? I see Dee Dee Fitch. She's the first one I saw. Dee Dee, if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi there.
Hi. So I know that we don't have her camera, although I think because everyone else is off, I feel pretty confident that if you turned your video on,
I don't believe I can. It says it's disabled by the host.
Well, never
I
mind.
will get that taken care of.
Oh, okay.
She's going to undisable you.
Okay. Am I there?
There you are. Beautiful. Hi.
Hi there.
Where are you coming at us from?
I'm in Oregon City.
Oregon City. Wonderful.
Mhm.
Very, very cool.
I'm
Okay,
actually in my dining room.
I love it. I'm in my bedroom. What are you going to do? Okay, so we have, if it doesn't challenge you, it doesn't change you. Do you have a story in mind that would work with that?
Yes.
Okay, beautiful. And you're going story to message. So we're going to start with your story. We're going to finish with the message, and the floor is yours. And I will go ahead and get a timer. Miss Barbie, can we see you? I know you were going to maybe do some timing for us. If not, Dee Dee, I'll just stop you right at 2.
Yep. Just turn me off.
Please, can we have our wonderful Zoom master do your timing for you? Because I don't know how to put the colors on the.
Oh, absolutely.
background.
I already have that set up. So
Awesome.
Ready.
I'm always ready. I'm a Toastmaster.
All right, Bianca, can I clarify? We're going story, message, story, message.
You're going story to message. So we're going to start with your story, and then it's going to lead into your message.
Okay. Tell me when I'm ready.
Crystal, you let us know with the colors. I think she's ready.
I'm ready whenever she's ready.
Okay, Dee Dee, it's all you.
All right. I'm 70 years old, and 6 years ago, I decided that I was starting over again. I was starting over my career of 50 years as a hairstylist. I have loved it, and I had loved it for 50 years. I started when I was 19, so I was 64 or 65 when I decided this is not all there is. I have probably 30 to 40 years left if I'm really lucky, and I am going to light it up. And I decided to leave my job as a hairstylist, left my clients who were my good friends, who I had loved on and who I had served for, some of them 25 or 30 years. And I started an entrepreneurial career. Now, that was, a lot of people thought crazy. And I decided to make it work. It was not easy. It was completely different than what I had been doing for 50 years. I was at a point in my life when most grandmas were stopping and just sitting back and enjoying their grandchildren. I wanted to show my granddaughters, especially, and my grandsons, that you're never done. You always have this potential to grow and to learn. And I wanted to show myself what would happen if I just started over, if I just completely changed course. And my husband was a little bit concerned about me, that I was having a late life crisis or something, but I was not. I was just going to finally be the big Dee Dee that I knew I could be and that I knew was inside, but I really had not had a chance to explore that. So this was a challenge. This was a huge challenge for me. I had a new way of doing business to learn. I had a new company to learn. I had, in fact, this is what led me to Toastmasters. I had to learn how to present to a group, which I'm sure you all will agree is terrifying. But if it doesn't challenge you, it doesn't grow you. And if I had
Ding,
not...
ding, ding. I loved it. I thought it was perfect. And I feel like you could make...
you know, I'm sorry, I didn't even see the timers.
Oh, you're good. You're good.
Okay.
Just not too long over, but I want to make sure we have time for everyone.
Okay, I'm sorry. I could have
You're
gone on for another
totally
5
fine.
minutes.
Totally fine. I know. And that, I think that you could make a 5 to 7 minute speech out of that. And you ended it. I think it could have literally ended right there with the message. If it doesn't challenge you, it doesn't change you, period, done. Right? So you gave us this story, you gave us this little backstory of who you are and how old you are and the things that you'd previously done, worked into your challenge of, hey, I want to change. What can I do different? Related it to your granddaughter, which I loved. I think that's kind of leading into something future as well. And then boom, ended with the message.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
I see
All right,
that
who's
Samuel has his hand up.
Perfect. I can't find him, but go ahead and unmute yourself. And Dee Dee, if you want to turn your video off, and
yes,
Samuel can put his.
Hello.
on.
Hello.
There he is. Hi, I found you. Okay.
All right.
You volunteered without even having the prompt, which is true table topics style. So your prompt, and I'm not going to share my screen again so we can all still see you, is going to be message, story, message. That's your plan. Okay, message, story, message. And your quote, and I can write it in the chat, is you didn't come this far to only come this far.
Didn't come this far.
To only come this far. Message,
far.
story, message.
Message, story, message. Okay, got it. Okay. To be completely transparent, I actually raised my hand, but Dee Dee beat me to the punch for the last question. So my hand has just been raised for a while. So just put me on the spot for the next one. Thanks for the encouraging words prophesied over me. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
Anybody else want this one? Or
No.
Oh, okay. He's good. He's ready.
Yeah. I have to think about it for a second. I didn't come this far to come this far. The message I would like to share to everyone on the line today is, in the midst of what this year has brought about, so much turmoil, so much change, so much adversity and this obligation, and the overall theme of change in and of itself has been a lot to swallow. The message that I would like to put before you today is to be resilient, to continue being resilient, because as long as you have life in your body, you have another opportunity to still go on, do great things, be successful, chase, chase your dreams down. Okay, so being resilient, uh, it's going to take it's going to take some being creative. It's going to take checking yourself. It's going to take challenging yourself with some grit. The story I'd like to share comes from this one. There was a little boy, and he was considered to be like an Eskimo, okay? An Eskimo. And he was trying to get across this solid sheet of this lake, this pond that once was. And he knew on the other side that there was potentially a lot of fish that were over there. And every time he came across that pond, there was a wolf that would stop him basically from coming across. He'll see it from afar and go back. So he never crossed the pond. At that point, the boy realized that, okay, I'm never going to get to the other side if I do not find a way to deal with this big bad monster, this wolf. What he did was he chipped away and he formed an icicle. He formed an icicle and he put some fish on the top of the icicle. And the wolf one day came out when he saw him, chased him away. The boy went and hid behind something, and then the wolf saw the bait, basically saw the bait, ate the food, ate the fish off of the iceberg, and started licking the iceberg. He didn't realize that his own blood was on there because he was getting hungrier and hungrier, realizing that he was slowly killing himself. The wolf killed himself. Hence, the boy was able to get across the pond and be able to get to what he was going for, which could be, in essence, the goal, right? Trying to get to the goal.
Ding,
if it
ding,
wasn't for
ding. We're out of time, unfortunately, but I love where you're going with that. Couple of things that I would mention. So we changed the message. You had your own message. I love it. Go for it. The be resilient. I think you don't have to tell people this is my message, right? You just start with be resilient. This is why we need to be resilient. And then you don't have to say, this is the story that I would like to tell you. Like, there was an Eskimo and he was trying to get across this river. And so you don't necessarily need to tee it up before you go for it. Right. And I think that was a great story. I think that you were getting to the point where you're going to say be resilient again, but we just ran out of time. But that's the formula. That was great. So we're getting really, really close to, you're welcome. We're getting really, really close to our time, unfortunately. So I'm going to share my screen one more time. And if you can, I would love for you to write down, and I can put it in the chat as well, for you to write down my information. So my website is theintervalproject.com. I do have a motivational podcast that I do, and screen sharing has stopped because the window is closed. So I will just go ahead and put it in the chat. So Bianca at theintervalproject.com. Happy to answer any questions after the fact. Since I disappeared at one point with internet problems, unfortunately, we ran out of time. You guys are great. I really appreciate each and every one of you showing up. I was not expecting this many. We had 57 in here, which just is overjoy. That's just so amazing. And I really appreciate all of you. So thank you so much. And I think, Crystal, back to you.